Hello, Red Wing fans. Welcome to this special edition of the Word on Woodward, brought to you by Bud Light. Today, it's our special conversation we're going to have with the Red Wing head coach Derek LaLonde. Also joining us with his press conference is the Red Wing general manager Steve Yzerman. I'm Ken Kell, radio play-by-play voice of your Detroit Red Wings, and I'm alongside Art Regner. Art, it's like old days here, you and I talking about the Detroit Red Wings, and hard to believe that the season is finally over.
Right. It certainly, you know how far back it goes. It goes back before either one of us worked for the Red Wings. We were in a car driving to Kalamazoo for Michigan playing the Western in hockey and always talking Wings. But it's great. It's great to be here, Ken. We really went by fast this season. And, there were some highs, there were some lows. But overall, I think there were signs, encouraging signs that this team is improving and it is getting better.
Last year, the Red Wings were last in almost every category, so Derek LaLonde came in, and one of his main objectives was to make this team better defensively. Shore up the team defense, and I think they really did that. Last year, they allowed 312 goals against. They cut that number down to around 270 this year, and I think overall they played really well defensively.
Yeah, I think defense was really a shortcoming last season. They really did improve on that. Specialty teams went from being in the bottom of the league to right around the middle on both of them in penalty kill and power play. So again, it's encouraging. Again, the thing that has really been the Achilles heel for the Red Wings is consistent goal scoring. They don't really have a consistent goal scorer, a guy that, it's easy for me to say this, pops in a goal about every third game at least, just to get on that score sheet, give the team confidence. And, there were scoring droughts this year by several players, not because they're not trying. It's just very difficult to score goals in the NHL. And certainly I think that is something, along with a right-handed shooting defenseman, veteran defenseman, a backup goaltender, goal scoring needs to be addressed this offseason. I'm sure Steve's going to do that.
Speaking of goal scoring, too, you look at the Red Wings, they last beat Montreal 5-0 in Montreal. It was actually a good back-to-back road trip, beating Toronto, then Montreal. After that, the well went dry. And, a lot of it, I think, Art, is the makeshift lineup that Derek LaLonde had to work with. There's been a lot of injuries all season long. The Red Wings had 302 or 305 man games lost to injury this year, and injuries are going to happen. But with that said, other players are going to need to step up and pop in those goals. But the last 5 games of the regular season, I think the Red Wings only scored 3 goals. And you need more offense, I think, in this league if you want to move up into the upper echelons of the league.
Right. There's no question. You're absolutely right. And I think you can look at it. Tyler Bertuzzi, before he was traded to the Bruins, he breaks his hand twice. One hand he comes back, and then it's the other hand. I don't know. I can't even remember. Right hand first, then left hand. Doesn't matter. He broke both of them, and it was out forever. Zadina just can't seem to catch a break. Losing Michael Rasmussen was absolutely huge because when Michael went out, the team started to, he had a profound effect on him, him not being in the lineup. I mean, Rasmussen is starting to come to his own. So again, there's different people. I like what I saw from Simon Edvinsson this year. I thought that, he played his 9 games, and I didn't think he looked out of place. I'm eager to see some of these other young forwards, like a Carter Mazer. What can he end up doing? Does Joe Veleno take the next step next year? There's a lot of questions. And then on the blue line, I'm really eager to see Albert Johansson, and I'm going to go all over the place, but I'm Sebastian Cossa too. Let's see if he can handle the #1 spot in Grand Rapids next year. If he does, then 2 years from now, it isn't out of the realm of possibility that, as I call him, the doctor is here in Detroit.
Well, I think, too, everybody needs to take a step up, and this goes with everybody on this Red Wing team, whether you're a veteran or whether you're a young player. And I look at guys like Mo Seider. What a terrific year. He's in my opinion, Art, in the top 10, I think, of all defensemen in the National Hockey League. Here's a guy that does it all. But again, he can make a jump to that next level. He's only, 21, 22 years old.
Just turned 22.
But the guy is simply amazing. We get an opportunity to watch him play each and every game. So he wants to take that next step up. A guy like Lucas Raymond, he's another player that this year was injured at times, but I think he needs to step it up a little bit and maybe show some of that offense that we know he's capable of doing.
Well, right, yeah. Lucas Raymond, he had 17 goals, like 40-some-odd points this year. I think a little bit of a drop off. I think there were probably higher expectations, at least a 50-point season from him. But I just think that he needs to get physically stronger. And I think that he'll probably hit the weight room this year. He's never going to be a behemoth or anything like that. But at times he's easy to take the puck away from him. They hit him and he goes flying. And I think he's going to add a little bit of grit, a little bit of strength. I was talking to Darren McCarty about this on Game Day Live one time, and Ken, the term that we like to use is that the Red Wings need to be a heavier team. They need to play heavier. It's not that they're not weaklings or anything like that, but if you're going to be successful in this grind, you've got to be able to take punishment and dole some punishment out.
Well, I think that was evident in the 2 games against the Ottawa Senators, Art, when the Red Wings just came off their best performance against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They outshot the Lightning something like 45-18, just dominated that game, and wouldn't you know it, they ran into a brick wall in Vasilevsky of Tampa Bay, who shut the Red Wings out. But the next 2 games really did the Red Wings in, I thought. Those 2 games against the Ottawa Senators just weren't very good hockey games. And again, you talk about team toughness. That's something I think that this team going forward needs to have. Now, whether that, I'm not talking about guys like Joe Kocur and Bob Probert.
Right.
Those guys don't exist anymore in the new National Hockey League. But you got to have a tougher fourth line, let's say a checking line that's going to help out to protect some of the top players and also be able to grind it out at times. And, again, this is a team that's building. It's going to take some time, and things just don't happen overnight.
No, they certainly don't. And again, I think there were a lot of encouraging signs this year. I mean, I really, really do. Yet, you pointed to it, the Ottawa series, those 2 games back-to-back in Ottawa, Monday and Tuesday night, from a Red Wing fan perspective, they were difficult to watch because the Red Wings didn't play well the first game, and they were worse the second game, and that was really kind of a red flag. Steve Yzerman was probably going to end up doing what he ended up doing at the trade deadline anyway. But in a way, I can see where he's probably looking at it, and if he had any second thoughts about what he was going to do, and he did admit it after the trade deadline when he had his little press conference, that if we were contending, probably I would have just bit the bullet, and some of these guys, namely probably Tyler Bertuzzi, we might have lost him for nothing. But I would have given this team a chance. But Ottawa proved that there was going to be no chance, seriously. And so, Steve did what he had to do. And, he's quite a lot of draft picks. And, look at the first 2 rounds this year, no matter where they are. If they stay at number 9, they're at number 9. I think the Islanders pick will be about 18. And then, I don't know what it's like, 40, 41, 42 in the second round. I mean, that's a lot of picks that they're going to end up getting, and and they need that. Or these are also assets that you could actually move for players too. I don't know. It's not an exact science. I think of trying to. There's nothing tangible if you can predict a guy's going to score a goal or not, or be a goal scorer in the NHL. But there are some guys maybe that might be available, want to change the scenery, don't like where they're at, and maybe with some draft picks and do a couple packages, some prospects, maybe Steve can bring one here.
And again, fans, we thank you for tuning in to our special edition of the Word on Woodward, brought to you by Bud Light. In just a few short moments, we're going to head down and see from Derek LaLonde and see what he has to say about this 2022-23 Red Wing hockey season. We were all up in Traverse City, Art, and we were all predicting, is this the year the Red Wings finally make the playoffs? And I went out on a limb and I said, no, I don't think this is the year. I still think that they were rebuilding. They really picked up some fine players in free agency over the summer. I was excited to watch these guys play, like David Perron, who I thought had a terrific year this year. Dominic Kubalik started off on fire, kind of tailed off a little bit. Ole Mata was solid on the blue line.
Whole year.
Ville Husso was probably an MVP this year for the Detroit Red Wings, along with Dylan Larkin. And all these guys were exciting new pieces to the puzzle here in Detroit. But again, I think going into next season, it's going to be a little bit different in the fact that I think the fans and everybody else wants this team to take that next step. And right now they had 80 points this season, which was 4 or 5 points better than a year ago. And with 4 or 5 more wins over the course of the year, you're looking at 90 points and maybe an opportunity to make the playoffs. So there's some high expectations coming up. And really, the long goal is to build a team where you're going to be successful year after year and win a couple of Stanley Cups. but you got to get to the playoffs first to do that.
You know, how many times we've heard general managers say, you know, our goal is to win certainly today, but to also win in the future, you know, so they have to have like a long-term plan and a short-term plan. And I would imagine at this point, I'm not so sure Steve is even in the short-term plan yet. Seriously, I think that, you know, he's got to look, you know, you've got to acquire assets, and, you know, where is the farm system really? Where is Grand Rapids? They're not going to make the playoffs. You know, there were a lot of injuries. Guys were called up. You know, what really are our European prospects? Who really are they? And you don't really know until they get to North America, start playing on that surface. So I really think that unless they catch a break on a player, like, you know, I'll tell you a player they caught a break on that, you know, that I liked, and he set last year, he set the Grand Rapids rookie scoring record, was Jonathan Berggren. I mean, he was, you know, absolutely 14 goals this year. You know, he needs to get a little bit stronger, you know, just like Lucas Raymond. You know, that's a good quality hockey player that is going to be here in Detroit for a long time. You know, Veleno's going to have to take a next step. I think Michael is just scratching the surface, Michael Rasmussen, about how good he can be. So there are some young prospects, and there is a future here. I'm just wondering if Steve thinks we still need to do maybe a year or two of tinkering before this club is exactly where I want it to be.
Art, I have a feeling that it's going to be a very eventful and busy offseason.
I agree.
And I think that if you look at the Red Wings and you look at their salary cap number, and they've got all kinds of draft capital that they can use, it wouldn't surprise me if they make a few trades this summer to try and boost the team.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's go and tune in now with Derek LaLonde, the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, and hear what he has to say at his press conference.
Hi, Derek.
Hello.
We've talked a lot the recent days about, you know, you've mentioned it's going to be hard to judge this team, but let me ask you then, how would you judge it up until the week of the trade deadline? So let's say through that Saturday game against Tampa before the two Ottawa. At that point, how would you judge the team?
Well, I think that's exactly why it's tough to judge the whole thing. Because if you were to ask me then, it would have been flying colors. We were in the playoffs. We had games in hand. You know, we'd be talking about, I'd probably be spending my Coach of the Year bonus already on some trip somewhere. So I think that's unfair on that end. That's exactly my point of, you know, it's hard. So at that point, you know, awesome. Our guys were playing the right way. Villy was playing like a number one goalie in the league, a top 10, 15 goalie in the league. Our special teams were clicking. You know, we were at obviously a pinnacle then, but I think that's a huge credit to the guys. I do feel in some ways it was probably a little overachievement for us. Probably not a true indicator of the entire season. You know, and I'll piggyback on the reverse end. You know, what happened here in the last 5-6 weeks certainly is not an indicator. Probably the reality is somewhere in between. So I would love just to go back to that date and call it a season, but it's 82 games in a season. There's a lot that goes into it, and right, wrong, or indifferent, unfortunately, we're probably exactly where we belong, and that's not playing on Monday or Tuesday.
What went so very wrong in those two Ottawa games?
Great question. I think they just imposed their game on us more than we did, you know, our game. And I think in both situations they got up and they were able to try to play a physical game with us, and we didn't have much pushback at the time. And again, I think those were just two outliers. It just happened to be right before the deadline. I think we would have bounced back from that game, those games. I think a couple bounces in either one of those games might have been different also. So those, you know, it's easy to point to those two games when the dam broke, but I don't think that's the case. I really think Steve would have and should have done exactly what he did at the deadline, no matter where we were at, because, you know, those were real. I think we did the right thing at that time. It just stings in the present. So Great question, extremely fair question with those two Ottawa games. But I do think this group, because they did it all year, would have bounced back from that.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Derek. Just to generate more offense next season, is that going to be, are you going to have to tweak the scheme, the system a little bit, or is it mostly just about personnel and growth?
That's a great question because it's not just about personnel and growth. Obviously, there's something to that. Obviously, we'd love a couple natural 50-goal scorers. I mean, even watching how special Boston was this year, even watching them back, I can't tell you how many games they'd be tied tight, and one of their star players ends up scoring his 47th or 48th or 49th. All of a sudden, they win 3-1. Everyone's happy again. Obviously, we probably lack that. I understand that. But even talking with our staff this morning, we had improved defensive play. We had improved special teams. Those are all underlying numbers anyone can see and read. But our offense did not improve. Overall number will because of our improved power play. You add in the power play goals. But our bottom line 5-on-5 offense, I think, is 100% something we'll look back at as a staff, look for some areas we can improve. It's just like anything else in your game. When it's not performing, we'll look back on. So, yes, there is a little personnel reality to that, but I think that's a cop-out. We'll certainly look to dive into that as a staff, and even if we return the exact personnel we have, we'll want to improve on that. So that's a legit question. Answer.
And also, just how do you feel about just this team's the grit and the abrasiveness and being hard to play against? Are you comfortable with that, or is that an area that needs to improve next season as well?
That's an area that needs to improve. And I think it can be learned within the group. I think you saw there's times that we had good pushback. There's times that we were more engaged, and it probably led to a better performance or even success that night. But there's times that we got pushed around. And, I mean, Helene just asked about the Ottawa series there. That's a reality in those two games. We got pushed around without pushing back much in that situation. So I think it can be learned within the group. And again, I think it's today's NHL. You don't need to go fight 4 times. You don't need to fight after every whistle, but you do need to stick up for teammates and push back. And you saw this group at times this year did that. So, yes, that's another area where we'll try to improve on, either within our group or obviously through free agency.
Thanks, Derek.
Derek, are those two things that you just talked about, the finding a way to find finishing an easy offense and kind of the pushback, are those the two biggest things for you going into next year?
Yes. Not surprised. Those are the first 2 questions. You guys see us all year. You're a knowledgeable group. You might as well have been in our coach's room this morning about 2 hours ago. Many areas we need to improve on. We will improve on. We want to improve on. But obviously, those are 2. If we could turn around quickly, yes, of course.
There are some people who kind of hear about needing more offense and think of offense and defense as a trade-off at 5-on-5. What's your philosophy there, and how can you improve the offense internally without sacrificing? The identity you came in was about defense.
100%. That's a great question because that's real. Can I sit here and say our improved defense led to a little bit of our lack of offense? I don't know, but there was probably times that we valued keeping out of our net much more than putting it in. And I think that's the step in the growth we needed to take. Could you combine both of those? I think there's something to that. But hopefully we've established a bit more of a defensive foundation. And you saw our guys, the way we competed, how we cared about keeping out of our nets, some of the things we did within our game. Obviously, I think we finished in the top 10 giving up shots against, improved slot shots against. There's some really quality numbers that we did improve defensively, but that could have led to a little bit of the lack of offense. But I think where we are as a group and the step we need to take in our growth, taking care of that end of the ice was the top priority, and that's where we were this year.
Thanks.
Derek, I like what you said at the beginning about the Coach of the Year award and spending the bonus that was there. That buzz that was in the air in this great hockey city, Red Wings fans could feel it for a while there, and they could feel it for the first time in a while. What did that sense of excitement do for you as a head coach leading this group, and what can that do for you getting a taste of that and giving fans a taste of that going forward?
Well, I think it says something about the group, and that was real. We felt it ourselves, even our guys that have been in this room a long time, the Dylan Larkins of the world. This is a passionate fan base. They're waiting for this to get over the hump. When we showed signs of it, and it was exciting, I think the fan base on a whole, appreciated the compete in this group, no matter what roster we fielded on any given night. So that's real, and I think that's something that you can build off, and I think that's something that makes this organization and fan base special. So getting a little bit of a taste of that, I think, was real for our guys. It's like anything else, any winning you do, any success you have, you get a taste, so you just want more of it. And I'm hoping that's one of many things that can fuel us into next year.
It's tough to win in this league without great play from elite players. Your best players on the roster, some of the best young guys this team has invested in with high draft picks. What did you make of the years and overall growth and progress of Dylan Larkin, Mo Seider, Lucas Raymond, and some of the other guys that you view as the top building blocks of this franchise?
I'm very happy with all of them. And, you just alluded to the core we keep talking about. And I know there was so much talk about what we lost at the deadline and what went out of our room. But again, I tried to preach around that time and even of late. At the same time, we were still building this core. Jake Wallman, you can put in that group, made a huge step this year, was a great signing for us. Oli Mata was a great signing for us. And then those young guys took their natural growth. Do we need more of all those guys? Absolutely, 100%. But to me, that's exciting, and I'm excited to get this going next year because of those type of players you've mentioned.
Thanks, Derek.
Hey, Derek, just going back to Lucas for a second, though. Was it a little bit of a growing season for him? There was still some offensively. And he still was prone to those up and down streaks, basically.
Yes, I still think there's growth for Lucas, and I think there's a little bit. I'm not going to call it a regression, but I think there's going to be some bumps between your first 2 years of the NHL and the fact he's never seen the American Hockey League. He jumped right into the National Hockey League. I don't think people respect how hard that is. I just think it's going to just keep growing steadily. There's going to be bumps in the road. Even physically, he probably went through some bumps and bruises. He went through some sicknesses this year. It's just part of being a young kid in this league. So I think a huge off season is going to be important for Lucas. Improving in a lot of different areas is going to be a goal of his this offseason, like most of our players. But he's still so fresh and raw in his development. There's still a ton of growth for his ceiling. And this summer will be another step towards it.
Hey, there's a small sample size, but, do you expect Edvinsson and maybe even Casper to be competing for jobs in training camp? Long time before training camp, but do you think they'll be in the mix?
I hope so, and we're going to give them every opportunity to be in that mix. I think that's a natural part of it. I hope they get to the point where they're forcing us to put them on the team on day one. If they're ready, great. I think you've already got a feel for me. I love playing young guys. I have no problem playing young guys. I think that's the way the NHL is now. It's the reality of the NHL now. But at the same time, making sure we handle their development properly. So I hope those two put us in some really tough decisions come camp next year.
The last one, do you expect all your assistants to be back next season, or is it too early to tell, or what?
Absolutely. I know Steve will meet with them individually here the next few days, like he will all of our players, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. But I'm very happy with our staff. My first time as a head coach, I had a specific reason of hiring every single person with a need, and we're still growing as a staff, but they checked off a lot of boxes. You can judge us on a lot of ways, but when you see improved special teams, and again, that's the entire staff, but that's a huge credit to our assistants. Obviously, they man those, and I oversee everything, but they're the ones truly in the trenches on those. So I was happy, extremely happy with our staff. They helped me grow immensely. I think you'd get the same feedback from our guys, and hopefully we take a step as a group this offseason and in next year also.
Sounds good. Thanks for this, Derek. Thanks for cooperation all season.
Yep. Thanks, Ed. You got it.
Hey, Derek, were there things when you look at the season that maybe you wanted to do that you weren't able to do, as far as just from having been an assistant at Tampa, that you were able to do before that you weren't able to come into Detroit that you couldn't do in year one, that maybe you have to wait for year two to do, or anything like that?
Wow, that's a great question. In that, we were just in different spots where we were in Tampa. We were obviously try to get a step from going good to great and win a Stanley Cup. Here, we're still early in those. So obviously, there's some things we weren't able to do personnel-wise. I reflected on a couple times. It's really nice. I probably didn't respect or have an appreciation for some of my guys in Tampa. I knew they were good players, but what kind of difference makers? I can't tell you how many times we didn't deserve to win a hockey game and Vasi won a game for us, or we didn't deserve to win a hockey game and Point and Cooch made a play or two. So maybe in some situations, yes, but on the most part, I'm pretty happy with some of the growth of our team game. Is it good enough? No. Are we where we wanted to be? Absolutely not. But I think we're going to take some natural steps in our team game just because we're into our second year of our process. Alex Westlund, our goalie coach, I know I referenced this earlier a couple of weeks ago, but he had a great line when we were talking as a staff, and it put it in perspective for me. Last year, day one of camp, we started on the goal line. I really do believe next year we're going to start on the 50-yard line, which is a positive with this core and this group going forward.
What about yourself? How do you, when you look at your first NHL head coaching season, I know you coached a game last night, but how do you evaluate yourself when you look at it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's hard to, I'll reflect a little bit more on it. I'll always try to grow. So yes, I'll need improvement with myself, with the staff, with some of our relationships. I think that's every coach that's growing. That's what they seek and want in the off season. So again, I probably reflect our group a little bit. Some obvious highs, some disappointing lows. There's probably I probably reflect similar to our group. Plenty of growth there. Any great coach grows immensely, and they have to have a growth mindset. I certainly do, and I'll tackle this off season like I have every off season of my entire career and look to get better.
And then the last one for me, throughout the season, I know there's things where Steve is the manager and you're the coach, and that separation is important. When it goes to the off season and now you have a full off season, do you become involved in those discussions of we need to add here, or like where do you become involved now in that discussion in the off season when you're not dealing with the players on the day to day?
Yeah, we're a team. There's no doubt about it, and Steve, says it all the time. We're in this together, and I'll have thoughts, opinions. He'll want my opinion, but I still think to be done correctly and for this to be done the right way and healthy, there still has to be that separation between manager and coach. He looks at the big picture and growing this team every single day of the year. I'm locked into the everyday and the now. So, of course, we'll be on the same page and we'll have needs, but it'll be him and his management group that ultimately make those decisions. I'm a coach. I want it all right now. I want 50 players and a $200 million salary cap, and that's not realistic. So Steve will be the manager, and I'll be his coach.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, Derek, you saw a very raw Simon Edmondson in training camp, but then you got him after almost a full season in the AHL. What did you see in those last 9 games that gives you optimism in projecting, that next year you're going to give him every opportunity to make that team?
I saw growth and, just like you said, optimism. That's a credit to the Grand Rapids staff, Ben Simons and his staff. They did a good job with him, much more detailed, much more ready for an NHL game when he came back. And it's tough not to get excited with what we saw in those 9 games, the package. So, again, he'll need to have a great offseason. I think between what he did in American Hockey League and here, I certainly hope he's going to be pushing for a spot on the team. But I saw growth from when he left us to Grand Rapids to when we got him back, and hopefully he continues to grow this summer.
Have you allowed yourself to think about whether in the long run, you might see Edmondson and Sider together, or do you think of the idea of having one of those giants on each defensive
Yeah, I
pair?
haven't really looked about that. You do hope players with those type of tools and that type of upside, you hope they land in your top 4. And for us to keep growing as an organization, they need to be. Now, whether that's together, time will tell, but we certainly hope both establish themselves in the top 4. And obviously, it's pretty safe to say Mo has established himself that with us right now.
And then finally, obviously you've mentioned your foundation pieces, but, obviously the younger players are also key to this rebuild. And I wondered what you thought of the seasons that Bergman and Valeno had, 2 younger players who are involved in all this.
Yeah, some positives for sure, and they took some steps, but they need more growth. I think I have no problem saying they took a dip in their game towards the end of the year. Understandable for young players. We've asked a lot of those guys. Even after the deadline, their role even increased more, and there was even obvious dip in their production, but some of their 5-on-5 play. So I think it's natural for young players. I think it's valuable and important for them to get those type of minutes in games. Now it's on them. Again, very important off season. You would hope there was just some natural growth and progression in their game, and they'll be better for it once camp starts next year.
Thank you, Derek.
You mentioned the highs and lows of the season for this group. And when you look back on the year that was had, what impressed you most about the team's commitment to main focus while under some difficult circumstances like the injuries and the trade deadline?
I thought for pretty much our team game was fairly consistent. And what I mean by that is it was an outlier when we had a extremely poor defensive game. Yes, there's games we gave up 6 or 7 goals, but there's very few games where we were on our heels for an entire 60 minutes, or we literally got outclassed. I think that's a credit to the guys. Obviously, we had that push, what Helene referenced to, before the deadline and where we were standing. But even after the deadline, I know it's different, and these teams have already established themselves as playoff teams, but beating Pittsburgh, beating Carolina, beating Boston, beating Toronto, all these teams within a 2-week span, it's a credit to our guys, but I think it was our team game that gave us that chance. Could we beat any of those teams in 7 games in a playoff right now? Probably not. I think that would be unrealistic. But there was some growth in there, and I think we were fairly consistent with our team game. Not all the time, not exact, not where we wanted to be, but I certainly think something to build on.
Thanks, Newsy.
And Derek, injuries are certainly part of what you have to deal with during the year, but I mean, you really didn't have Fabry hardly at all this year. You didn't have Zadina really at all this year. Is there still a sense that you haven't seen what, when this team is firing on all cylinders as a fully loaded roster, what it's capable of?
Absolutely, 100%. Of course, every team deals with injuries. We're no different. We probably were not as deep as some other teams that went through some injuries that could survive it. Everyone, again, it's so easy to reference back the type of players we lost at the deadline, but the one that really stung this group was Rass. Rass was a huge part of our team. He was part of our top six. He was part of our penalty kill. That physical pushback that we talked about that we were missing in some games and some situations that Max referred to and early on, he was a big part of it. We're excited to get a healthy Rass back also. So I think that's part of it. Hopefully in that ideal world, those guys come back and a bigger and better and version of themselves. But we also understand that injuries will be a reality. Let's not forget, beginning of the year, we went through 5-6 of our top 8 forwards out of our lineup early on, and I thought we did a really good job of managing that. So, talk about some hope and optimism. Of course, Bob, some of those injured players coming back in a good fashion next year, we feel can help.
Along those lines of hopefulness, it seems like in these exit interviews, we always talk about what the team needs to do to get better. But what did this team do this year that, I don't know if surprised you is the right word, but that delighted you and just makes you feel good about the future?
The push. I will give.
Being is that you need to be balanced. You can't be too high. You can't be too low. Mata was a guy who came in here and solidified the blue line because of his calmness and his nature and his steadiness. And that was really, really a good pickup. And obviously, I had this big speech for Mata planned out. Like I was going to go up to him and say, Ole, I found your career, and all that, and you were a Penguin, so I didn't really like you that much, but getting to know you, I hope the Red Wings don't trade you, because I figured for sure he was a prime candidate to be moved. I think we all did at the trade deadline, and he wasn't. Steve, re-upped him for 2 years, and so I never had to give that speech, but I had one because he's really a terrific guy. I say this a lot, and Ken, you know this. We grew up here in Detroit. We've been lifelong Red Wing fans, and most of these fellas, when you meet them, you're kind of glad, and this, I know it's going to sound corny, but you're kind of glad that they're wearing your team's uniform, that they're representing your city or your state, because they're just good guys. They're classy guys. They conduct themselves well, and that's kind of cool, So I know when the Red Wings go out on the road, if I'm not on the road, me and Kenny, together, we're not representing Detroit that well, but but you can rest assured the players are.
Well, a couple of unrestricted free agents this year, a couple goaltenders that the Red Wings have right now are Alex Nedeljkovic and Magnus Hellberg. At times they played well this season, at other times they didn't. And, Nedeljkovic had a pretty good year last year. He was really the Red Wings' main goaltender, and then he just kind of imploded, 4 or 5 games into the season. He was sent to Grand Rapids to try and get his game together, came up late in the season, actually played 3 or 4 solid games in a row. But and Hellberg's another player that the Red Wings acquired off the waiver wire, and at times he looked good, at times he didn't. He won some games, he didn't win any games. But I think what the Red Wings are looking at now is maybe consistency in a backup goaltender. Ville Husso was terrific. Again, I think he was one of the most valuable players on this team, along with Dylan Larkin, especially as Derek LaLonde said early in the hockey season. But I think in the offseason, the Red Wings are going to need to look at a backup goaltender that's going to help out Ville Husso.
Well, it's essential. I think that, and that's why I asked Derek LaLonde about that question about Husso. Was he hurt? Because this is a time of year where, a guy will say, Husso was playing with 4 broken bones in his leg, but he still got it out. You hear about these horrific injuries these guys have, yet they somehow play. And I was just kind of curious, and I really do think that Husso was hurt. He missed 3 weeks, and then he came back. But LaLonde has gone out of his way several times now to say he was healthy, he could play. So what that tells me is that he had 55 games is about it for Ville Husso, you know, and that's a lot of games as a number one goaltender, and it's a high pressure situation, as we know. It is essential. It is essential to get a backup goaltender that can play 30 to 35 games for the Detroit Red Wings. That'll only make Ville Husso a better player. Although Husso has told me on several occasions he would like to play 60, you know. Okay, you know, hey, I hope you do. I mean, I'm your biggest fan, but, you know, I think they need a quality backup who can play at least 30, 35 games.
And it needs to be the right player, too, the right goaltender, because if Ville Husso is going to be your number one guy, you need a goaltender. Maybe it's a veteran goaltender that knows what his role is on the team, and that means, well, Husso's going to play 55, 60 games a year, and then it's up to him to play every 5 or 6 games to get in there and give you a really good chance to win.
Yeah, it will.
It's got to be the right chemistry.
You're absolutely right, because, you know, there's only it's the oddest position in all of sports, because there's only 2 of them, and they're in competition sort of with each other, but yet they rely on each other because they're the only 2 that know what each other is going through, and, you know, they're playing the same position, so they have to get along, obviously, and they have to have a friendly competition, which, you know, most rooms probably do, but you know, it has to be a guy who understands that he is the backup, and being part of the backup is to support the number one. And if he's going through some rough stages, knowing that, you know, mentally you got to be there for him, you got to be his buddy, and then you also know that you could step in at any time. You might play 2 or 3 games in a row while this guy kind of works out whatever else is going on with him, and then, of course, if he gets injured, then you become the man. So it has to be somebody that has an established, I think it has to be an established NHL goaltender who has a little bit of a resume.
This is the special edition of The Word on Woodward. We thank you for watching, and it's brought to you by Bud Light. In just a few short moments, stay tuned, because Steve Yzerman will be around with his press conference and talk about this year's team and the team moving forward. You know, while we're on the subject of goaltenders, Sebastian Cossa was a guy that you and I, we covered in the draft, and he was too good to play back in junior again in the Edmonton.
Was not going to get any better there.
So he had to get to the next level, and I know Steve Yzerman talked early in the season. They just wanted to get him to play, right? Whether it be in Toledo or Grand Rapids or flip-flopping between those 2 teams to try and get some experience in. But I want to tell you something. After a little bit of a slow start, Cossa has really taken storm there in Toledo. I mean, he has been on a roll, and he's probably the best goaltender right now in the ECHL.
You know what I like? You said taking storm, and one time the Toledo franchise were the Toledo Storm.
And the Gold Diggers.
Yeah, and the Gold Diggers, too. They've always had great names. Now they're the walleye, you know, probably the meanest fish of all the Great Lakes species, I guess.
Good eating, though.
Yeah, they're delicious, right. I'm really looking forward to Sebastian Cossa taking that next step, which would be to establish himself next year in Grand Rapids as the number one goaltender. If he does that, and I have every reason that the doctor is going to do that, establish himself, and then 2 years from now, based on what happens in Grand Rapids, hopefully they get in the playoffs. They have a long playoff run. 2 years from now, that I think that he'll certainly be knocking on the door here in Detroit, if not a backup. Maybe he challenges Husso for the number one. Husso will be in the last year of his deal, not next season, but the season after that. I think Cossa makes his move then.
Carter Mazur's another player that I thought really did well in his professional debut with the Grand Rapids Griffins. I think he was a point-per-game player. He had 3 goals, 3 assists in 6 games.
Right. Carter Mazur is, you know, people are comparing him to Tyler Bertuzzi and saying, you know, he's kind of has the same grit, goes into the greasy areas, isn't afraid to mix it up. You know, looking statistically, I think he might even be a little bit smaller than Tyler. But, you know, which is good. No problem. I mean, he was an overager. He wasn't drafted at 18. He was drafted at 19. We know his history. Chris Draper coached him. But here's a guy that went to the University of Denver, won a national championship, which I dispute, of course, but because they beat Michigan, Ken, as you know. But seriously, you know, he's done nothing but since the moment the Red Wings drafted him have excelled and excelled and excelled. You know, much, and I think fans are getting really excited about another player since the Red Wings drafted him who's done very, very well. It's your man, it's my man, it's Amadeus. But, you know, you better hold back on Amadeus Lombardi. I think that he needs to get some seasoning and see exactly what type of player he's going to be when he's playing in in the AHL for the Grand Rapids Griffins.
Had a great year, Amadeus, with the Flint Firebirds, over 100 points. He was a point-per-game player in the playoffs, too. What a great series it was between Flint and Saginaw. And he's going to play the last couple of games with the Grand Rapids Griffins. Crafty player. He needs to build up the body a little bit, but the guy can skate. He's a terrific stick handler, and he's going to be really fun to watch.
Right, he certainly is good. And I want to get back at Kosa. Derek LaLonde, who actually, coached the Toledo Walleye, and Dan Watson, who's there now. The ECHL, it's a great product, and if you want to go down and see really good hockey, go to the Huntington Center down there in Toledo and watch the Walleye. They're going to be in the playoffs. They had that string of 18 straight victories this year, but that's a real run-and-gun league. It's wild. I think LaLonde said it's chaotic. That's a great place for a goaltender to perfect his craft. In his first year as a professional, to play the whole year in Toledo, I really think, and I think Kosa, 5 years from now when he's a perennial all-star, will say that his experience in Toledo really set the table nicely for him in his pro career.
Well, we're having a lot of fun here talking about the Red Wings season and going into the summer, and it's going to be a busy summer, I believe, for the Detroit Red Wings. Well, let's have some fun right now because the Red Wings did score some really good goals throughout the course of the season, and I've got a favorite goal. Actually, I got two of them, and we'll see those goals right now. But the first goal that I really enjoyed was when we were in Pittsburgh. The Red Wings were down 4-0 that game, came back, and Jake Wallman, who had a lot of big goals for the Red Wings this year, scored the game-winning goal in overtime, and it gave Detroit the win. Here it is right there, and what I really liked about it was the gritty celebration afterwards.
Well, Ken, you've always been a dancer and light on your feet, so I knew that you would admire that one.
In the disco era.
Oh, yeah, Disco Ken.
I say this because we saw the goal right there where he put it in on the backhand. That destroyed Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, after 16 years of making the playoffs, failed to make the playoffs this year. And today, they got rid of everybody in their front office.
Right, yeah, it was interesting. I think, losing the Blackhawks at home in a must-win situation. And, Chicago's been playing for the Connor Bedard sweepstakes all year. So, yeah, I think that probably sealed it's unfortunate. You don't want to see anyone lose their job, but, those gentlemen's fate.
As a radio broadcaster, you always look over the season and you say, gosh, what was your best call of the season? What call did you really like the most? And I look at the Wallman goal against Carolina with 3.2 seconds left, I think. And what a game-winning goal this was. And there's the shot right there as we see it. He shot it from the left side into the upper corner of the net. Look at him. and that Carolina just could not believe it that they lost this hockey game, Art.
No, they couldn't be. And right. I mean, it was really, really a stunner. I mean, at that point in the game, they think we're at least going to get a point, and they didn't get anything. And and Wallman again, though, the thing that I like about Jake Wallman is not only is he a great skater, is that he's not afraid to shoot the puck. I mean,
he's got a good shot.
Yeah, he has a good shot, and he likes to use it. And so I think that's obviously. I think that his skating ability, and he has a good shot. And he likes to shoot. Jake Wallman has been really, I don't know if so much a pleasant surprise, but he's been a bit of a surprise this season, and I'm really happy for the guy.
Sometimes it takes players when you acquire them in a trade to really find out what you really have. And when I first saw Jake play, I knew he had a really good shot. We saw it all the time.
Right.
But we didn't see the offensive capability that he has right now and what he has shown this year as far as making moves at the line, faking players out, moving into the slot and getting good scoring chances. And obviously those two goals were just huge goals for the Red Wings. But I know you have an outstanding goal of the season. Which one is it?
Well, of course, it's a young man that I'm obsessed with, Mo Sider. The shorthanded goal, backhander, stealing the puck from David Pasternak, and then skating in. And, the reason why I love this goal so much is there's Mo's goes. No one's catching him. He's lumbering up there. He gets up there, and I think he said afterwards that he was as surprised as anybody because, as you know, a backhander is probably not a shot that a defenseman works on very often, simply because he's not that close to the net. And on most occasions. But to me, I think that's the goal of the year. Stealing the puck from Pasternak, Pasternak coming back, trying to, Pasternak tried to, upset the timing, and Mo, boom, and it was in the back of the net and a backhander. To me, I think that's the goal of the year.
So many good things about that goal, and including it was a shorthanded
Right,
goal.
shorthanded
by the way.
goal, yes.
So you put all those things together, and Mo Sider again, he just does everything well, offensively, defensively. He blocks shots. He had over 200 hits this year, and sometimes you get defensemen like Carlson. He had a great year. He had 100 points, but he's
Right.
more of an offensive-minded defenseman, and he's not very good on the defensive side of the puck. He's good all over the place, Mo Sider. Joy to watch. We all enjoyed watching Nick Lidstrom play. He's a little bit different player than Nick, but man, the players or the fans here in Detroit are going to have a really good time over the next 15, 20 years watching this kid play.
Well, right, I told Mo that I hope I'm alive when his jersey's going to be up on the rafters. He told me I would be, so I'm going to take I'm going to take that as I have to. But he's obviously he's a really, really good player. Ken, I've told this story before, but when I followed Mo's draft year, I always followed like in September of 2018. I guess he was drafted in 2019, I believe, in Vancouver. He was the one player when I started to look at the rankings, he was, I don't know, like 48, 49, right around there. By the time the Red Wings drafted him, he was rated in the top 15, and he was the one player that each month when these rankings would come out, he was the one who jumped the most. And, Moritz Seider, he was German, kind of stood out. He was playing in the DEL, I believe it's called, and Deutschland Uber League or something. I have no idea. But he's playing in that league, but he was moving up. So when Steve took him at number 6, everyone, I didn't think it was that much of a stretch, because I believe that if those rankings would have come out a month later, let's say, I think he would have been in the top 10. I mean, he was really moving up that much. He played in a men's league. Okay, granted, the German league probably isn't the Swedish league, but it's still a very, very good league. It's a league that, ironically, that Ben Simon, the Grand Rapids coach, played in. And so when Mo got to Grand Rapids, Ben had a pretty good idea of the competition that Mo was playing against, because he played in the same league. So I think everything about Mo Sider from the moment they drafted him, where he was the dominant player at the prospects tournament. I can remember Jim Nill and Jimmy Bedard, who, Nill obviously general manager of Dallas, and Bedard was doing goaltending work for them back then. I mean, they came up to me and they both said, that Mo Sider guy, he's the best player here. I mean, Stevie really got himself something. Then they were talking to me about it, and I really thought, wow, that they're absolutely right. I mean, they're absolutely right. He has not missed a beat, and the joke that I always had is, if Reykjavik, Iceland would have had a professional league or a team, I think Steve would have sent him there. I mean, they were sending him all over the world to play, and but once he hit Detroit, he wasn't going anywhere.
Well, again, Steve Yzerman in his press conference is coming up here to talk about this 2022-23 season and a look ahead at the draft and training camp perhaps coming up in September. Hard to believe the season's already over. It seemed like we were just in training camp. But again, this special edition of the Word on Woodward is brought to you by Bud Light. And we heard from Derek LaLonde. He was talking about some of the players, Art, that I call them unsung heroes. They're guys that aren't big names, but they play a big role on this Red Wing team. And one of the players that was brought up was Alex Chason, who really found a home, especially on the power play. And sometimes teams need specialists, whether you're a penalty kill specialist or a power play specialist. But Alex Chason was that type of guy. All right, Steve Yzerman is at the podium. Let's go downstairs and listen to the general manager, Steve Yzerman.
You're almost exactly 4 years in. How do you think it's gone overall?
Well, it's gone okay. I would love to be further ahead in the process. Again, as started out saying that 4 years ago, it's going to take time. We're going to have to be patient. We're trying to draft well, try to accumulate more draft picks. We've been able to accumulate more draft picks. Time will tell if we've drafted well. That's the reality. It's just a slow process. So I would love to sit here and say I'm thrilled with where we're at and how things have gone through 4 seasons. There's been some. I've been pleased with some of the development of our draft prospects, and others are taking longer or haven't quite turned out at this point to what we had hoped. But that's okay. I fully believe in where we sit here today. I guess from 4 years ago, I'm not disappointed at where we're at. I guess I'm okay with it, but I intend to stick with the process, the plan. Nothing's going to dramatically change. We'll continue to look for opportunities, as I say repeatedly, to expedite the process. That is, is difficult to do, but we'll continue to do that. But so I guess 4 years in, I'm okay with where we're at. I'm hoping to see more improvement. We're starting to see some, this year. Last year we had Lucas and Moritz come in. This year we got games from, Berggren, Michael Rasmussen, who was drafted prior to me getting here, has taken on a bigger role. Joe Valeno's slowly increasing his role on the team or having a bigger impact on our team. So we're gradually moving some of the younger players in. So going back to it, I guess I'm okay with where we're at. I would, like all of you, I wish we were further ahead as well.
And just how do you plan to replace the offense you lost in Bertuzzi and Verona? And I know they didn't play a ton, but you had them earmarked coming into the season to be a huge part of the offense, and even Philip Roenick for that matter.
Yep. And Philip Zadina was out all year. We kind of had him factored in there to contribute to the offense. So, again, we'll look at the free agent market to potentially replace some of the offense. I hope within our own team that we get more production out of some of our younger players that'll take on a bigger role. And I'm not necessarily looking for guys to go from 8-10 goals to 50, but if we can, take a guy from 8 or 9 goals that goes to 14 or 15, and everybody, just the younger guys, play a little bit bigger role and also contribute a little bit more on the offensive side, that will help. We'll look at free agency, but yeah, I look at, again, going back to the players that we moved at the deadline. Obviously, I knew at that time that there were going to be holes in our roster and prepared to deal with that. And truthfully, I might not be able to address all of those in this offseason. It might not be possible. Some of our young guys might not be ready, and players in free agency might not be available, but it's still things that had to be done, whether it was at the deadline or this coming offseason.
Lastly, just I know we only got to see Marco Kasper in one game, but both with him, and you spoke about Albert Johansson at the trade deadline. Are you thinking both could maybe push for jobs in Detroit next season, or?
Well, I sitting here today, or even next September in training camp, I like to believe young players, every player that in their off-season training, as they come to training camp, every player, regardless of whether they're invited or a first-round pick, they all have, in their heart that they're going to make the team. They have a hope, a drive that I'm going to play well enough. I'm going to show them enough that I have a chance to make the team. So today with those players, I wouldn't say absolutely not. They're destined for Grand Rapids or whatnot. They have a chance, but that'll be determined through training camp. Marco had, as you know, played all year in Sweden, came over and played one game, good, bad, indifferent. I don't want to assess him on that one game. He's a young guy, as with all of our younger players. I want them playing a lot, playing significant minutes, playing significant roles. So that will be determined after training camp. Albert was having a very good season in Grand Rapids, got injured, hasn't played. It's been quite a while, actually. He'll be fine. We expect him to be fully fine for next year. But certainly, as when we talked at the deadline, I'm not sure if his name was brought up specifically, but referenced as one of our guys that will, in all likelihood, if we need a D-man, particularly left shot D-man, that we'd see him up here. So prior to him getting hurt, we were really pleased, extremely pleased with his development. And, sitting here today, he hasn't played probably in 6 or 8 weeks, I think it is. So he has a chance. But, as you know, we have I'm pretty comfortable with the left side of our D. Simon's got work to do to crack the lineup as well. So, we'll figure it out. And those young guys are going to have to, push one of these guys out of the lineup.
Thanks, Steve.
Hey, Steve, thanks for doing this. What areas do you think you guys need to improve on going into next season, at least as you sit there right now?
Every area, Ted. I want to say, there was improvement if we just look at, what did we win 35 games versus 32 last year? I'd like to win more games next year. Our power play, I don't know where exactly. I probably should have looked at all this before getting on, but we're 20th or so on our power play, our penalty killing, as opposed to 30, 31, 32. We've improved in those areas. Our goals against overall has improved. Took a real hit here in the last couple of weeks. I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm not going to read a whole lot into that, what's gone on the last couple of weeks, but we improved in those areas. Obviously, it's not good enough. We got to score more in general as a team. And as I say, I may or may not be able to address that. What I'm really hoping on, and it might only be incremental, but our younger players all chipping in a little bit more, able to do more. Joe Valeno being able to contribute a little bit more. Philip Zadina, Lucas, all of our young guys, everybody chipping a little bit more. So again, it's not trying to be witty or anything, but we really need to get better in every area. We got to be a more physical team. We got to be a more competitive team, and that doesn't necessarily mean I got to go out and get somebody 6'6", 250 to go out and beat people up. You have to win puck battles. You have to block shots, win face-offs. All those little things make a team more competitive. We have to improve in all those areas.
Hey, first year on the job, how did you feel Derek did behind the bench?
Very well. He's an experienced guy. He's coached for a long time, been a head coach for a long time, been through a lot of it. Good 4 years as an assistant, albeit in Tampa, but he handled things very well. I think he has a good assessment of our team. I think, I mentioned those numbers. It's a big part of it is, the coaching staff with the organization, the way they wanted to do things. So I'm very pleased with the first year. And I think Derek would say, despite all his experience or regardless of all the experience he has coaching, your first year behind the bench, actually in charge, you just learn a lot about, the daily, grind of coaching or the organization, the preparation, the practices, the travel, all that. You just feel more comfortable after a year, and he's only going to continue to get better. But overall, I'm pleased with the atmosphere around the team. I'm pleased with the job the coaches did in preparing our team for games, having organization, and it was reflected in the way we played for the most part. And I'm not going to belabor it, but I'm sure the question will come up again. Post trade deadline, we traded players. We didn't bring players back in return for that, and we lost players to injury. So we took a huge hit. So the numbers beyond the trade deadline weren't necessarily reflective of the entire season.
Hey, quick one, last one. The goaltending. Where do you think for Husso was kind of a learning curve this year too, and then just the way the second half season went and all? Well,
I would take it beyond the second half. I think Billy had a very, very good season. Most games he's ever played in the NHL. The individual or personally, his numbers at the end of the season aren't good. You can go back and look at them. He's been dealing, as you know, I won't go into specifics, dealing with an injury. And I think that not so much the injury, but with kind of our plan to, at one point we weren't sure if he was going to play again. Then the plan became, hey, let's get out there and see how you do for the rest of the season. Physically, I think he did fine, but I think he wasn't necessarily maybe mentally ready to play these last couple of weeks because he's planning a completely different plan and things changed. I think the good news is, and I haven't met with him yet, is that physically he went through it okay. But you know what, none of us have been starting goaltenders in the NHL, but I think we would all say we recognize what a tough job it is. And I think he's only going to get better for it. I think he did a really good job for beyond half of the season, for 2/3 of the season, 3/4 of the season. He won a lot of hockey games for us, and I think he'll be better for it. I think, his challenge is going to be I know what it is. How do I do this night in, night out? But for the most part, I'm very pleased with his play, and our team in the last 20 games. through trades, through injuries, we weren't as strong a lineup, and that forced him and to make more saves, and it at times was tough for him. But I think mostly dealing with an injury and figuring out what we were going to do and what the plan was, I don't think that made it any easier on him. But overall, I'm encouraged. I expect him to be better next year and for the experience that he's had.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, Steve.
Yeah, hi, Steve. Just what do you hope to see from a couple young guys, Edvinsson and Casper, in training camp next season? What do they have to show you to make a push to make the team?
Well, the obvious question is the answer is they got to be ready to show they can play regular. I don't want players at their age at this early stage of their careers simply playing minimal minutes, whatever that is, for a forward or a D-man. Training camps are it's really debatable how much you should read into them, because you're at the games, and a lot of games you'll dress a strong lineup, the other team will have a very thin lineup. Debatable how much to read into these games. And I think I look for it. Have they physically improved? Are they stronger? Are they a little bit quicker? Can they, have a positive impact in the preseason games? And then if they are, then you decide, should we keep them around for a little while and play, or send them? And that goes for any player, really. Or do we send them to the minors and kind of start there and let them just play their way up? So, again, I think most importantly, we'll see what happens with our roster in the off season. And then in the preseason, are they the best person or the best player for the spot we're looking at? Do they outplay the other players that are vying for those spots? And if so, okay, what is it? If it's simply if we carry 13 forwards, if they're the best 13th forward or the best 7th D, they're far better off being in Grand Rapids playing a lot. So I guess that we'll see the competition, who they're up against, what our options are, and ultimately decide after preseason what kind of a role are they going to play into the regular season. That's really what we did this year with Joe Veleno, for that matter, with other players. We're debating, should they go down, should they stay, and some stayed, some went down.
And also, just how would you assess Lucas Raymond's second season?
I think it was okay. One, I think extremely highly of Lucas Raymond as a young man and his talent as a hockey player. I think he learned a lot from this year. It was a grind. Now, in fairness to him, David Perron comes in as a right winger, and the spot that Lucas played last year, David went into that role and did it quite well for us, and that forced Lucas to adapt, maybe at times play on the second power play unit, which in the NHL, there's a huge difference playing on the first unit to the second unit, because the first unit literally gets the prime minutes and more minutes. So I think he adjusted well to that. A new coaching staff playing, on different lines and different situations. I think he did fine. I expect him to grow from it. I expect him to be better next year, but overall, I think he played very well for us. And when I haven't had a chance to meet with, I've only met with a very few, or a small group of our players. So look forward to spending some time with him, sharing my thoughts with him on his season, what my expectations are for his off season and for next year. But I think Lucas is an excellent young player who is only going to continue to get better. And in some ways, grinding it out this year is going to make him a better hockey player.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve, did some of the injuries this season make it difficult to assess the season as a whole, or did it maybe allow you to assess things in a different lens on the big picture sense?
I guess you lose players, some good players to injuries. It doesn't make you. It's hard to say it makes you a better team, but it gave some other players opportunity to play, and you learn a little bit more about them. And younger players were forced into maybe a bit bigger role and got to play more. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Overall, in assessing the team, I don't think it had a huge impact. we did reasonably well. We managed to survive it for the most part early in the season and had a pretty decent record. So, I'm not really sure the reason, but you look around the entire league, and maybe it's in other sports as well. I just don't focus on it as much, but like every team gets hammered with injuries now. There's a lot. You need a lot of players. You need depth in the minors. So, you just deal with it. And like I say, you call your players up from the minors, whether it's a young kid or a veteran that you sign with that purpose for being a call up, you get a chance to see them. So I guess to answer your question, I don't think it really it did change the assessment of our team. Really didn't change dramatically kind of the things that I intended to do throughout the course of the season and whatnot. I kind of had a good understanding of what we were going to do, and I think our team somewhat finished in an area I really truthfully expected us to be in at the start of the year.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, when you talk about kind of the areas that you guys need to improve, when you look at the free agent pool, do you think your answers are out there, especially kind of in the age range you guys have kind of gravitated toward?
Well, I look at the group, and I believe there's players there that would help us, and I would like to sign. The issue is there's 31 other teams, and the list isn't really that long, so that makes it challenging, and it's hard really to. I sit here today on whatever it is, April 14th or 15th, and I don't even know the date today. Somebody could tell me what day it is. I know it's Friday. That's about it. The 14th. All right. Now I forgot your question. Sorry.
Just about the free agent class as a
Yeah.
whole. And if
So today, I sit here today. It's hard to we talk about these players. We know who they are. We kind of have an idea. These guys would be a good fit for us. Really, until like July 1, I have no idea if we can get these guys or in the mix for any of them, and some of them will end up being signed prior to that. So it's really hard to plan, build your team or plan for, hey, we're going to do this in free agency. We have spots. A year ago, at the same time a year ago, would I tell you on July 1 that we're going to sign the players we did? And we didn't know. We knew these are spots we needed to fill, and we were able to fill them with players. And again, we'll look at it. I think it's going to be challenging in some spots because of the lack of depth at some of those positions. You can go through the list yourself and figure out what those issues are for us. That I'm not going to point it all out, but we're going to have some challenges, and we're going to, as long as we continue to hopefully one of our, these younger players that are on our team now play a bigger role next year, and maybe one, maybe two of our younger players that whether they were in GR or coming from somewhere else, maybe they push into the team, but we'll slowly add to it, and we'll do the best we can to fill our roster. I still want to be a competitive team next year. I want to, guys that fit the position, the type of player, and maybe most importantly, the character of the person that fits into our lineup to help with Dylan, with our entire team, with our younger players. I really like the veterans that we brought in this year. I like their attitude. I like their character. They help their team on and off the ice, and I'll continue to try and add those type of players to help us as we build a young team that can compete for playoffs and Stanley Cups one day, hopefully.
As we sit here today, would it surprise you if you ended up being as active as last time around, whether it be free agents, trades, just kind of off season as the whole?
Max, I'll be active. How much I can actually accomplish, I don't know. Again, last year there was a lot of players, more, a bigger group of players available in free agency. There's not as big a group this year for whatever reason. What teams want to do, it's too early to say at this stage how active teams will be, on the other end, wanting to say, I'm looking for players. How, is there going to be a fit out there? I can't answer that at this point. The season just ended, so and the playoff teams, we won't be talking to them until into June probably.
And then on the question of the kind of toughness, competitiveness stuff, I know you said you don't want to just sign a 6'6" guy to beat people up, but assuming there's someone who can play, is that is that an area in personnel that would be a priority add, or would you prefer it come internally or just with guys you're already getting?
There's a lot of the word competitive. There's a lot of definitions of competitiveness or ways of defining being a competitive hockey player. Nicholas Lidstrom, again, one of the greatest defensemen ever. He was really, really competitive. Was he out there competitive like Vladdy, knocking guys down with open ice hits and whatnot? No, but he was extremely competitive, and he won puck battles. He made plays. He was there when you needed him. He didn't get pushed around in front of the net. We got to be more competitive, and that goes in every aspect of the game. And there's a lot of areas I'd like to improve upon, and that goes with the group that we have, the guys here. It's incumbent upon them to be more competitive as well. If we want to make the playoffs, if we want to win Stanley Cups, we got to play harder, and we'll try to add different components to the team as we move along, not just this year, but moving forward. Try to add those components. And going back to my own playing career in the mid '90s, we changed the roster. We had good teams. We changed it around to bring different components to give give our team more balance, and I'll continue to try and do that. But competitiveness is a very broad, in my description, competitive hockey players, there's a lot of different ways of defining it, and it can come in a lot of ways. So I've seen, it just, everybody's got to be a little bit better, and we'll try to address a lot of areas, but it's not necessarily we got to go out there and fight and beat people up. You got to play hard.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, Vili's signed for a couple of years after this, but you have UFA situation in goal. How do you address the other goaltending spot, and is Alex Delkovich still potentially part of your plan?
Both Magnus and Alex are unrestricted free agents on June 30th. Potentially, yes, both could be part of the plan. I'd like to sit down with both of those young men and talk about my thoughts on their season, talk about next season. But, we talk about all the other areas of our game that have to improve. I was pleased with Vili's play this year, but ultimately, collectively, our goaltending, our save percentage in general has to be improved. Our goals against average, which isn't just an individual goaltender statistic. Goals against is a team statistic. Even goals against average or a shooting percentage can be a team statistic, because and now the new one is expected goals and expected saves. Those can be, to me, not just goaltender but team defensive statistics as well. We need to be better. We need to improve in that. Can we do it? Are our best options within, including those two young guys, or is it looking at other options? Now, right now around the league, look around. We're all looking. Every team is looking to, whether it be to improve in one area, whether it be their starter or backup. With a lot of teams in the league right now, where the goaltending market is somewhat thin. So. Whether we go back with the same three, we need to be better. That goes for all three of them. But ultimately, as a team, we need to be better to help them out too. We can't, I think we did reduce the grade A chances we give up this year. We need to continue to bring that down, make it a little bit easier on them.
You mentioned expected goals there. How do you use things like that? How do you use the analytics like that for yourself as you make decisions for both long-term and short-term?
We look at everything. There's all sorts of statistics. Truthfully, I'm not sure what necessarily to read into them. I've found over the years we're still in the infant stages, I believe, in the NHL of what's important, what's not important, what really has bearing or not. And it takes years to decide if these things are really, really important. 10 years ago, everybody was focused on Corsi and Fenwick. Now it's different things, and in time we'll look back and say this is important, that's not important, or that's important. So for myself, I guess to answer your question, I have my own, and we have internally what we think is really important to us and what we really value, and Don't really care to elaborate on it just because, we'll do things our way.
Last one for me. With how do you just look? Obviously, your job as a manager is to manage the entire organization, and it's Grand Rapids is going to miss the playoffs this year. And I know there's development there, winning and development at the same time. How do you look at how things have gone in Grand Rapids as far as it proposes to obviously the ultimate goal of building better players for your team?
Yeah, well, I look at Grand Rapids this year. Ultimately, it starts with our management team here in Detroit, myself, Sean, our pro scouting staff, to put together a team that we think it is really important, Sean, the development of our players, but also we want a winning environment, and we didn't put together a good enough team this year. Didn't put together a good enough team last year. Now it's interesting when we kind of in the off season or prior to the season pencil in who's going to play where, kind of think we have our depth and whatnot, and then you get a couple of injuries on the big club. You bring players up, that hurts that roster. You get injuries down there. Like what happened in Detroit really hurt Grand Rapids as well, and that be having a lot of injuries. It hurt their lineup, and then players that were slated to play there all year were injured. So it's been a very disappointing year in GR for us. We expected more. Having said that, the team we put together for various reasons, I think underperformed. One, a lot of the guys were simply up here for more time than we expected, and they also ran into the injury bug. So we'll continue to try and do a better job. We had some, positions or on the team that underperformed for us there, and we're hoping to fill those spots, whether it be with our own prospects or go out and sign some free agents that can help the team down there. But we're certainly, I speak for the organization and saying we're disappointed in the season that we had in Grand Rapids. But having said that, myself and Sean, we're the ones that are responsible for it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve, Derek just told us a little while ago that at the start of the season, he didn't see this as a playoff team. Did you share that point of view at the start of the season, that this was not a playoff team? And did that play a factor into your decision to be sellers at the trade deadline?
Well, again, going into the season, I know people kind of, will read into whether it be media or the fan base what we did on July 1, while we've really changed gears and we're really making a push to the rebuild is over, so on and so forth. The reality was, again, I said it then and I said it at the trade deadline and I say it now, was to get better players, to get players to help our environment, help our young players on the ice, off the ice. I think it was important. I never want to go into a season saying absolutely not. We're not a playoff team. You want your coaches, you want your players to have some hope. You never know what happens. We weren't that far out really prior to the deadline, so it was a possibility. But going into the season, did I expect us? Was the goal to make the playoffs? Did I expect us to make the playoffs, Carlos? No, I didn't. Anything can happen, good or bad. We got again, you see Vegas go in their first year in the league and go all the way to the finals, and maybe they saw it happening, but probably the rest of us didn't, and they've continued on that path. But to answer your question specifically, the goal wasn't to make the playoffs at the start of the year. And having said that, the coaching staff and the players, once the puck is dropped, their goal is to win every game, and they did a pretty good job to get there. But am I disappointed based on expectation at the start of the year that we didn't make it? No, because again, I was hoping for improvement, and for the most part, I've seen improvement in our team, and I've seen improvement in our young players going forward. Now, I expect I expect improvement in these same players for next year. Does it translate into us going from 35 to more wins? I'm not sure, but I expect our guys to be better. We need to continue to get better. These younger players have a positive impact. Our veterans continue to remain competitive, good players for us as we go forward. So.
Just my other question is just this year, you guys are going to miss the playoffs for the 7th straight year. It ties a franchise record. How much does that change, I guess, your urgency or maybe your decision to get away from the Yzer plan patience model and maybe have more urgency to make the playoffs and take a little bit more risk maybe at the trade deadline? Does that factor into it as far as you don't want to set the record for playoff drought?
Honestly, I'm not at all concerned, Carlos, about setting a record for a number of years out of the playoffs. The reality in the NHL, again, in a 21-team league, 16 teams made the playoffs. Now with 32, 16 are still making the playoffs. It's harder than ever. I don't use that as an excuse, but that's the reality. If you look around at some of the teams that are currently the leaders in number of years in the playoffs, you look back to where it took some of these teams a long time to get into that position. They were the Detroit Red Wings at one point, where we're at today. What I would love to make the playoffs next year. Absolutely, it would be such good progress for us, and I hope we make the playoffs next year. But I'm not going to do anything out of desperation. I'm prepared to do, whether it be sign anyone, to make a trade, whatever, to make us better. But I'm not going to do it out of desperation. And ultimately, I've got to decide on any move we make. Is it the right thing in the long term? Is it the right thing in the short term? And I would love to come up with a great idea or find something that gives us a better chance of making the playoffs next year. But I'm not going to do anything that just gives us an opportunity gets us in the playoffs, so I can say I didn't hold a record, or I hold a record or break a record in a negative way. I'm going to keep trying to build a really good team that's going to be a good team for years to come, and I would love it to be next year. But as you know, I can't guarantee that by any means.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Steve, obviously as GM, your job's to look at the big picture. You're starting to see, the guys that you drafted, a few of them are making an impact in the NHL. You've got a number of them now in Grand Rapids. Is that giving you optimism that, you're headed in the right direction and things are starting to come together?
Slowly, Bob. Yeah. I wish it was quicker. I wish more of these kids were like, we'd all look around and you wish you had more of your prospects ready to go sooner. I think most importantly is to remain patient with them, let them mature and grow up and develop as players at the right rate. Try to have a good environment for them, whether they remain in college, remain in junior hockey, or finally turn pro. To be patient. Some of them are moving in. Again, as I started off, or I spoke earlier, is I wish we had more of them coming. And ultimately, try to have a lot of draft picks. Try to get a lot of prospects, because some you think are going to really turn out for various reasons don't, and you get surprised by others. So I'm optimistic with some of our guys, and truthfully, I was hoping for more from some of them. And doesn't mean they're written off or whatever. It's just, it's not always just linear that they go from the draft to, good junior players, good college players, right to the NHL. There's some ups and downs, whether that's just in physical maturity or injuries. It takes time, but and they don't all pan out the way you hoped.
Along those lines, Elmer Soderblom obviously made the team out of training camp, and looking at numbers, he certainly tailed off and didn't have a strong second half in Grand Rapids. Are you still feeling good, like he's part of the future?
I think he has potential to be part of the future. Yes, you look back. at the start of last year, and he had a pretty good training camp. And again, the initial plan was, and it's easy to look back now and second guess yourself all the time, but coming out, the initial plan was, Elmer, all those guys will go down. Jonathan Bergran another year in GR. Jonathan started in GR. Elmer had a pretty good impact, and we thought for the role that we were looking for, he would do fine. I'm not sure exactly what point, but close to the midpoint of the season. He wasn't playing that much, and we sent him to the minors just to play. Other guys were playing, and then he got hurt, and he really hasn't played much since. So, again, we'll see what his off season's like. Have a good idea of what he is as a player. Is there room for growth? Absolutely. I still think he has tons of potential. And we'll see how he does in preseason. Again, if he's not ready at the start of the year and he's not going to play a significant role, he can go to the minors. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world for him. I look at, there's several players going around the league that kind of bounced around for a while and finally found their way at 23, 24, 25. So, with his size in his hands, I think there's a potential real NHL player. Can he do it over the course of an entire season? I hope so. But again, he was slowed a little bit by injury when he went to the minors, and these things happen. And going back to why it's not always a smooth process of getting to the NHL. But I still hold out hope for him. And is it next year? I'd like it to be, but I can't guarantee it. And he's going to have to really. My message to him and a lot of the players there as the season winds down in Detroit and GR is, guys, just because you might have finished the year here or finished the year in GR, don't assume that's where you're starting next year.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. You might be on mute, Kevin.
Try it again. Okay, there we go. It's not like you didn't warn the fan base, Steve, about how long it was going to take. You obviously had experience. You knew what was going on. But, when you look at like this season, starting with the free agent acquisitions, you can probably make a case that most of those guys did what you wanted them to do or exceeded that. Guys like Mata really stepped up, and Perron got a lot of goals and everything. And then, Wallman, stepped up and played a bigger role. Your younger players are coming in. Like, it feels like you've had, a lot of good things happen in the rebuild, and yet it's just been a tough sled. You're, incrementally improving. Does it times seem even harder than you thought it was going to be to, make the progress you want to make?
Yeah, Kevin, honestly, it's an emotional roller coaster. It's an emotional roller coaster for our fans. I understand that, myself included. There's days you walk out of the rink and you're like, you know what, I'm real happy with the way things are going. The young guys in GR are playing well. Your prospect in junior or college is having a good time. The team's played well. And then 2 weeks later, you walk out of the rink and you're like, oh my God, like there's no end in sight. What I try to do is just stick with it. There were, I appreciate you asking the question, because we sit here, there were a lot of good things this year, absolutely a lot of good things. And again, through the trades we made at the deadline and the injuries to the Rasmussens and Fabries and, other guys in and out down the stretch, we sit here today and somehow feel disappointed. But if I look at the big picture, I'm confident we're going in the right direction. I wish it was wish we were farther ahead. Everybody wishes we were farther ahead. Every other organization kind of in our spot feels the same way. So there are a lot of positive things, and our younger guys are growing and playing well. They're maturing. Maybe their stats, weren't as what we maybe projected or hoped at the start of the year, but it's part of the process that they're becoming more mature hockey players. They're becoming men. They're learning to deal with some of the adversity. So I do think there's a lot of good that came out of the season. The veterans, the free agents that we signed, good stats, bad stats, whatever. really like them as people. I like what they brought to our team. And not only did they help us this year, I think they're going to help us next year and moving forward as well.
And then finally, I just wanted to ask, we put a lot of emphasis, obviously, on Casper and Edmondson because they're, it feels like they're closer. But, guys like Lombardi, Mazer, Wallander had decent years this season. Just in general terms, can you talk a little bit about the progress they've made as, your draft picks?
Yeah, well, we'll start no particular order, but Carter Mazer had a real good year in Denver. His second year, they won a national championship a year ago. Had a good year this year, and decided to turn pro. We signed him, and he's been played a half a dozen games in GR, and he looks like a real good prospect. Is he ready to play next year? Maybe, maybe not. But he looks like a good prospect. He looks like an NHL player for me. He skates well. He's got good hands. He knows where to go on the ice. So he's going to be on our team, and I think he's going to be a real good player for us sooner than later. Is it in September or October? I'm not sure. Amadeus Lombardi had an awesome year in Flint. He's really a good little player. He's very creative. He's a very competitive guy. If he's 5'9", 5'10", 170 pounds, that doesn't matter. He's real competitive. Is he in there running guys over, knocking guys out? No. But you know what? He drives to the net. He somehow gets into the corners first. He makes plays. He's very creative. He's a very entertaining player. Can he take that to the American League or to the NHL one day? I hope so. He certainly has the ability to do that. He's going to have to adjust to playing against bigger, stronger, faster guys, but had a really good year and is a fun player really to watch. So we really hold out optimism for him as to be one of them guys that's on the smaller side that just has it to be an NHL player. Time will tell, but kind of excited at the potential that he has. William Wallander had a real good year. He's developed very nicely over in Sweden. He's got a lot of work to do. He's over here right now. He's played one game. He's dealing with an injury, so would have liked to have seen him play a little bit more. Expect him to be back over here next year, but he's worked hard and come a long way. He's got a lot of work to do still to be, but he is a prospect. His skating has really improved, his puck handling and play. He's got the one that he is in a very good program in Rogala in Sweden. And, we got Nick Cronwall and Nick Lidstrom close by watching him and working with him to the extent that they can. But he's developed nicely. He's maturing as a young man as well. So we have optimism for him. You talk about Simon and Casper. They're good prospects. I'm not sure when they're going to be impact guys in the NHL. Could be next year, but it may take some time. But we're optimistic. We've got a group of them coming. I hope to see one or two of them next year. But if we don't, I think they're coming sooner than later.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, a lot of eyes on Andrew Kopp this season after the deal he signed last summer. Beyond the offense, when you're watching him play, how do you measure his game, his effectiveness, and I guess how would you evaluate his first season here?
Overall, pretty good. When a play I wouldn't call that he signed a 5-year contract. You know what his AAV is. With that comes expectations, at least production-wise. You can debate whether he met those expectations, at least in your eyes, or not. He's a very, very good two-way hockey player. He does a lot of little things extremely well. He was very, I would say in fairness to him, he got off to a bit of a slow start. He had a surgical procedure in the off season, which delayed his ability to train and to skate, but came in. I really like his hockey sense. I like his durability, his flexibility as far as being able to play all three forward positions. As the year went on, I thought he had a bigger and bigger impact. He was very good on our penalty kill, a very good defensive player. I think Derek mentioned to me this morning he was one of or maybe our only plus player, and he played a lot of hard minutes. I think he's a very good playmaking centerman. I think he only ended up with 9 goals. That would be the one statistic that we would all look at and say, geez, he needs to score more. Ultimately, I didn't necessarily sign him for his scoring ability. I signed him for his all-around play, his flexibility. So I'm pleased with the year that he had, and I think we can count him in for, if I'm penciling guys in for X number of goals next year, I think I'll pencil him in for, more than the 9 that he had. Is it 12, 15, 20. I'm not really sure. But overall, I think Andrew had a very good season for us and contributed in a lot of subtle ways that really don't necessarily wow you, but is a very good player and a very useful player. And I'm very happy that we have him on the team.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
Last question, Art Regner.
Hi, Steve. I don't know how much time you've had to take your own deep dive into the 2023 draft, but would you agree with what seems to be the general consensus is that this is a very, very deep draft class?
I find we talk about really, really deep drafts when there's somebody special at the top. And if there's not somebody special at the top, it's just another draft. So I think it's a really deep draft.
Because Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli are that good.
Maybe amongst others, yeah. I think today we sit ninth and is potentially 17th with the Islanders pick. We don't know who we're getting at that point. Maybe we get some luck in the lottery, maybe not. But regardless, we have ideas where we're going to pick if we stay close to where we're at today. And at least in the first round, we're very optimistic and we're excited about the options that we think we'll have at that point. So overall, I think it's a pretty good draft. But again, Art, once you get by those top guys in any draft class, and some years they're not there, we don't get as excited about the draft. We being, I guess, the hockey world,
Right. I mean, I understand that. And the reason I'm asking you is because you have 5 picks in the top 45 in this draft. Do you find your position going into this draft is one of strength, meaning that, okay, I might draft 5 guys, but maybe I can move some of these guys? I mean, do you have maybe a lot more options because of the number of high picks you have in those first 2 rounds?
Well, I would say we theoretically could have more options. Ultimately, today, I don't really have any options because I haven't talked to anybody about anything. So right now we have five picks, as you say, 2 in the first round and 3 early in the second. And Chris Draper and our amateur scouting staff continue to be out there watching all the leagues that are playing and watching the players that are playing to have a good handle. And we have our list together and just having preliminary discussions with them throughout the season and looking at the lists and having a chance myself to watch a lot of the players, particularly the kids higher up on the lists. We feel pretty good about it. But yeah, having more, they're all assets. The draft picks are assets. Your prospects are assets. Players on your team are assets. So the more assets you have gives you the more flexibility to potentially do something. Really, once the trade deadline is over with, the non-playoff teams or the teams that acquire all the picks are focused on watching the amateur players, and the teams that were the so-called buyers, they're focused on making the playoffs and the playoffs. So we'll start to once as teams get knocked out and you get closer to the draft, then you start to talk to other teams and see what, if any, options you do have at that point. But certainly these picks are assets and very valuable assets. And we've used in the past, right or wrong, we've used some of our draft picks to acquire players. And again, last year, giving up a early third round pick for Ville Husso. I was pleased with that move, and we're still able to continue with our process of our plan of trying to draft and use our draft picks to get prospects. Every now and then you need to get some players too, and I think we would all agree with our picks. We'd rather have a player than a draft pick. Maybe not necessarily the first or second or third or whatever this year, but players are known quantities, and our draft picks they're unknown. So if you can get a player, you try to get a player.
Steve, Sebastian Cossa, I know at the beginning of the year, was he going to go back to junior? Was he maybe in GR? And you decided to put him in Toledo. Can you talk about Sebastian and the year he had? Maybe struggled a little bit, but seems to have finally taken that step.
I think we're all very pleased with Sebastian's season to date. hey, he struggled early in the season. We decided to leave him in Toledo because we knew he was going to get a lot of starts and it was going to be a challenge for him. What I could really say is his attitude has been unreal. Like he's a worker. He relished the opportunity to go to Toledo and play a lot. He's worked extremely hard. He's a worker in practice. We talk to our coaching staff in Toledo on a regular basis. His attitude has been excellent. His determination has been excellent. And his play has continually improved throughout the course of the season. They have a very good team in Toledo. He's got competition in the net, which is good for him. And, you know, we hope Toledo has a good playoff run, and we hope Sebastian is an important part of that. But I'm really pleased with his development, his progress throughout the season. One, hey, it was great for him to struggle early in that, you know what, he had to battle, and he battled, and he worked hard, and there was no excuses, no feeling sorry for himself, no pouting. He just went to work every day, and he continues to get better, and we just hope he continues in that with that mindset and continues to get better as a goaltender.
Great. Hey, Steve, one more question about Sebastian. Is the plan then maybe next year to take the reins and be number one in Grand Rapids? Would you like to see, and then perhaps a year from now he could be knocking on the door here in Detroit?
The plan is, I think he's playing tonight, Art, and we'll reevaluate after tonight. How's that?
Okay, well then I'll hold you to it though.
Yeah, you know what, Art? Going into next year, if he's the best goaltender to play in GR and grab the reins, so to speak, or be the starter, then he'll be that. If he's not ready for that, you know, whether he's a backup there or he plays in Toledo, we'll let it play itself out. One, I think he's a good prospect. Two, I think he's really determined, and we're just going to let his play dictate where he goes. And when we see him in Detroit, honestly, your guess is as good as mine at this stage. I think he's shown that he's a good prospect. His next year, is he ready to play in the American League? I hope he is. Maybe he will be. Maybe he won't. But as long as he's going in the right direction, that's all I worry about.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, those are all the questions we have for Steve. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Steve, thanks for the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate everyone's. One, for our fan base, the support we got this year was outstanding. And for all of you, appreciate, one, you being here today at the trade deadline and the coverage that you give us. It's very important. So once again, thanks a lot. And we'll probably talk close to the draft.
Thanks, Steve.
There you have it, Red Wing General Manager Steve Yzerman with his thoughts regarding the season and some of the future prospects. And Art thought he brought up a good point about just making this team a little bit better. He understands that he's got to look at free agency and hope he can get a couple of players in that regard. But the most important thing, and it's something that you and I talked about before Steve got on and discussed it, is the fact that players on this team really need to step up another level. And just looking at percentages, right? Yep. You look at a guy that scored, let's say, 10 goals, right? If he's 50% better, that means he's going to score 15 next year. And if you get a group of players that can do that, then all of a sudden you're a better team.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm getting the feeling, based on, we both, have seen Steve for a long, long time and covered him certainly as a player and, in his role as a manager here. I get the feeling that he's more than willing, as he always has been, to do whatever it takes to make this team better. And I think he also was pretty open and honest and said there's 31 other teams, and what I may want to do or who I may have targeted, that may not happen because it depends on what the 31 other teams are thinking too. But I have an idea that, and I wanted to ask him about the draft. I wanted to ask him about these 5 picks. I think he has some assets. I think he's going to do some maneuvering, and I'm just as pure speculative. I don't know, anything like that. But I think that he has a little core here that he likes. But I think that long term, he knows he still has quite a bit of tinkering to do.
Well, the other thing about general managers is they don't look at the games or their team like we do
Right.
as media people. They're way ahead of us. I mean, they're looking down the road too as to how this team is going to be 3-4 years from now. And when they select the player now, they're already thinking 3 or 4 years from now how that player is going to help the team.
Right. You're absolutely right. And if you look at
And just to be, sorry to cut in.
No,
but,
go ahead.
But just saying that everyone wants to look at next year already, right? How is this team going to be next year? How is it going to be? But they're thinking sometimes 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And that's the way it is. That's how a general manager thinks.
obviously that's the way he thinks. And look what he did at the trade deadline. He, this sounds bad, jettisoned 4 players, but he did. And what did he get in return? Not players. He got draft picks. And I think that's a telltale sign. Granted, some of them were number 1 picks, and they're all high round draft picks. But this is something, an asset of what he can do. I mean, they have, and I believe, and I'm going off the top of my head, the first 45 picks, if they keep them all, 5 of those guys are going to end up being Detroit Red Wings, and that's pretty good percentage. And again, the draft is supposed to be really, really good this year. Next year's not so much. So I'm really curious to see how he's going to maneuver it. Obviously, he's thought a lot about it. He knows what he wants to do. But as he said, am I going to be able to do it is another story. But I really think, every time Steve talks, I get pretty psyched up. I'll admit it. But, I mean, I think that he's going to go out there, and I think he's going to be really gung-ho this offseason. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this club's going to look at and what the team's going to look at when they hit the ice in Traverse City.
Well, I'm going to mention this right now. A guy like Dylan Larkin, who's 26 years old, he's going to be 27 pretty soon. He's not thinking 5 years down the road. He wants to win right now. Derek LaLonde, he's a coach. He wants to win right now, too. So the general manager has a tough job because he has to deliver players that are going to make these players better going into next season, but also looking at the big picture, which Steve from day one always had his mind on, is how is this team going to be years from now, and can they be competitive for the years to come and be a Stanley Cup championship team?
Well, right. He wants to go back to the days. I mean, and obviously, I mean, he built Tampa. Tampa's going to be a good club for a long time. I know people are going to say eventually, but you have Vasilevsky and net. You're going to be pretty competitive there. And, Kucherov is still scoring goals at a record pace. Stamkos hasn't really slowed down. And I'm not trying to talk about Tampa Bay, but that's his club. That's his team, and he wants to put the Red Wings in that same position. Unfortunately, when he walked into Detroit, he didn't have Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman. But maybe he's going to get there. I really think, and I wanted to ask him this question, but this is the problem that the Red Wings face when you look at it. We all sit there and we talk. They need a backup goaltender, which they do. And could it be Ned? It could be, maybe. Maybe Magnus, but Ned probably has a better shot. They need a right-handed shooting defenseman. When you let Hronek go, and that was a good deal, anybody in their right mind would have taken it. Get a first and second rounder for him. Maybe a veteran right-handed shooting defenseman. But what they really need is goal scoring. But unless you draft a goal scorer, but there's no formula for a goal scorer. There is no tangible formula that tells you whether a guy is going to be a legitimate goal scorer. And if you happen to get one, guess what? You keep them. You sign them. Those guys aren't traded for. They don't leave unless they have a falling out or something, but most of the time, so that's the real key here. That is the most difficult task that Steve's going to have here, is trying to get consistent goal scoring, get goal scoring, up that 5-on-5 play. I mean, that is a difficult task. That's why I think he's still acquiring assets, because if he's going to find them, chances are you're going to have to get lucky in the draft to get them, because those guys aren't traded. And right now, the Red Wings don't have consistent goal scoring. He said Zadina, we hope, Fabry. I mean, if these guys stay healthy, maybe they develop into it. Veleno still has a lot of potential. So we'll see. And Carter Mazer might be that guy that comes out of nowhere. Remember, David Pasternak, and I'm not knocking Dylan here, was drafted after Dylan. But I guarantee you the Boston Bruins never thought that he was going to turn into the goal scorer he is. That's kind of what I'm alluding to.
Kind of like Nikita Kucherov too, right?
Right, exactly.
He wasn't a first-round pick.
No, he wasn't.
And he turned out to be blossomed into a very good player.
Right. So that's why when I look at it and I see the moves that Steve made, I'm thinking, he's still at a stage thinking, what we really need, consistent goal scoring. I might have to really, really look at the draft for that.
Well, you have to build a team through the draft, and you have to build a team through free agency, and it's a combination of both. You can't do one and not the other. So, it's going to be a busy summer, I think. And we're just going to wrap things up right now, Art, and some final thoughts about both Derek LaLonde and Steve Yzerman. What was your overall take on what you heard today?
I think that they're encouraged, and I think they're encouraged because their special teams got better. They were at the bottom of the league. Now they're in the middle. You acquire better players. Guys grow into their roles a little bit. Lucas Raymond comes back and bounces back. At least has 20 goals next year. He had 17 this year. Mo Seider takes that step where he is the elite among the elite, which I think he can do. And Dylan's obviously the heart and soul of the team. He's going to give you everything that he has. Husso gets a capable backup. If it's Ned, it's Ned, and that they share the net, and he doesn't get fatigued. And Robbie Fabre, if he can bounce back, if the poor guy can't keep getting hurt all the time, he's a goal scorer. He scores goals. And so, Kubalik, more consistent, scored 10 goals in the first half, or 12 goals in the first half of the season, 8 in the second, gave him 20. But, if he can regain a kind of a more consistent score and touch, Berggren takes a step. I mean, it's encouraging, but with that said, they're not a playoff team. So they still have a ways.
Well, we have a lot of coverage throughout the course of the summer. Hard to believe that the season's over with, but it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting off season, and just a couple of key dates just to pass out to you. May the 8th will be the NHL Draft Lottery, and that's where we'll see where the Red Wings will select.
9th.
Hopefully they go forward and not back.
Yeah,
or stay
don't go
the same.
back. Anything under 9, I'm going to be upset, Mr. Bettman.
June 28th and 29th is the National Hockey League Draft. I believe that's in Nashville this year.
Yeah.
And one of your favorite cities.
Yeah, so
and July 1st is always NHL free agency. So just keep it here. We'll keep you up to date all summer long. It's going to be an interesting summer. And Art, I appreciate sharing the microphone with you. I want to thank everybody working behind the scenes who stayed around with us today. Like the jokes too, in the background there. That was pretty good. And also everybody in the control room. It was a fun day. And you never want to see the season end. You want to keep going, and because hockey is just such a great game. But it's got to end, and now you look forward to the next year.
Well, definitely, Ken. As you know, I grew up idolizing you, so to sit here and share a microphone. Ken's like 2 months older than me, so but I always like to zing him with that one. But I really think that you should consider, because Daniela Bruce is now doing her duties with the Tigers. Usually she would host the both of us, and I think that maybe if you're up for it, a name change to Kenyella could really work. I think it fits you well.
I don't think Daniela would like that. But anyway, we miss Daniela. We wish her all the best at the Tigers, because I know she's busy over there. But it was a pleasure hosting today.
Yeah,
Art, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, stay tuned, because we're going to have a lot of information throughout the course of the summer. Any breaking news, you'll see it right here. Again, a special edition of the Word on Woodward today, brought to you by Bud Light. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy the weather, and have a great weekend. Thank you.